something that can be like bigger than solo independent auditors. So do look forward to that also in the future, because we'll be trying to do a lot of new stuff. And yeah, if you want to know more about me, you can look at these, but I guess you can read the blog. It's kind of insightful, but this is just my portfolio.
This team is really strong. I mean, I'm really excited for what's coming from you guys, yeah, let's do this. I mean, and it must be a really busy year for you too, because working in SpareBit with Trust and Renaissance, I mean, prepare to work, bro, but I guess it's going to be really compensating.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finding a balance, I guess. But yeah, that's
very true.
Preface to this is I'll be talking about my audit methodology, but firstly, everything will be in the context of audit contests and maybe just applicable to audits themselves. But don't try to take this methodology and apply it to bug bounties, because this is not going to work. There's like a completely different way to do bug bounties that will not work for audit contests and will not work for audits, and vice versa. And secondly is that please don't try to like straight up copy what I do, because this is something that works for me. It might not work for you. Like an example of this is the debate whether you should draw your code. Not draw your code. Whether you should draw out like contracts and try to visualize everything. Like Nisido has asked me whether I draw, and I said I don't draw at all, and he was quite surprised because a lot of people do it, but that's just something that works for me. So what I want you guys to like take away from this is you should maybe try out what I'm doing, and if it doesn't work, just throw it away. But don't try to straight up copy what I'm doing just because I'm doing it. Next. Yeah. So typically I like to tell people that auditing comes in phases. I used to say there was 3, but now I added like the preparation phase. So preparation is basically before the audit starts, before you see the code. And this is just basically how you get an idea of what you're going to be looking at, what you should be looking for during the audit. But you haven't looked at the code yet. And secondly, you'll be understanding. This is the part where you look at the code, but you have no idea what is going on, and you're trying to like download the mental model of the code into your brain so that you can reason about it and try to find ways to break it. And the third phase will be ideating. This is where you like have a full understanding of the entire code base in your brain, and you start jumping around the code base to try to look for places where you can break the code, or places where like interesting things can happen and like funny things can happen. And last part is kind of underrated. I'm not going to be talking about this a lot because it's not very important. I mean, I guess it's important, but it's not much to talk about. So this is reporting. This is basically where you write your reports. It's quite self-explanatory. So let me just check the chat. Okay. Yeah. First, the preparation part is, this is before the audit starts. Typically, if you do contests like this phase doesn't exist, you can do it if you want, but usually people who are grinding contests, they like jump from like one contest to another, and you don't have time to be preparing. But if you move on from contest to like audits, like under SpearBit, or like for audits under Trust, I don't think, or even solo audits, you shouldn't be going into your audits straight up blind. You should have an idea of what you are going to be auditing and be prepared for it. So what usually I like to do is I look for documentation of the project. Like in Code Arena, you will see the RSVP channel, and if you know you are going to be doing, okay, I can just show you an example, I guess. So on Code Arena, you will see like the RSVP channel, right? And usually you will pick from here what you want to be doing. And what I used to do is I'll see the notes. I will just look through all of these and figure out what I need to learn before the audit starts. I mean, I guess this isn't very helpful now, but maybe like you can Google what iterative bisection for optimum arbitrage search is and like read up on it. And another thing I like to do is, because they will usually link like the protocol, right? What I like to do is I will Google the protocol and see if they have any documentation, because this is not very informative of what you're going to be auditing. But before I start looking at the code, I want to have an idea of what kind of protocol I will be auditing, like whether it's a staking protocol, whether it's NFTs, maybe it's a bridge. Yeah. So you look for documentation. And the second point of this phase is also to catch up on like your knowledge gaps. You can sort of call it studying. So let's say you're going to be auditing like an EMM protocol. What you should do is you should read up on like related topics. For example, will be Uniswap V3 math, because you know that it's an EMM and it's most of the time going to be using Uniswap V3 math, or it's like a direct fork of Uniswap V3. So what you should be doing is you read up on related topics so that when you are looking at the code, you won't be like straight up lost. Because I think for those who have like audited an EMM before, you know that if you don't have prior knowledge, right, you're going to be wasting a lot of time just wondering what is going on in all the math. But whereas if you have context of what the code is supposed to be doing, or you have read something related before, you'll be flying through the code a lot faster. For example of this preparation, this is like the only contest where I prepared, honestly. But this is Chainlink CCIP. It was in, I think, June or July last year. What I did is I just Googled Chainlink CCIP. And the good thing is that they are very public. So what I did is I read through the documentation, and from that I know it's a bridge. And I know that once I know it's a bridge, I know that I'll have to be Googling like a lot of things related to bridges, how they work, what is like the logic flow, and what are like with the related bugs on the bridges. And I also watched, it's a bit overkill honestly, but I also watched these two speeches on the CCIP. But what I was trying to extract from these two speeches was that I wanted to know how it was actually working under the hood. Because if I tell you that it's a bridge, you don't know how it's working. You just know it sends like tokens from one chain to another chain. But these two lectures actually went through how the bridge worked in depth. So what they did is they had like I'll show you guys later, but they had an outline of like the router to the token locking functionality and how it's sending stuff over from one chain to another chain, which is really, really helpful before you start auditing. And another thing I did after that is, once I know it's a bridge, I just like look through Solodit to find similar protocols which are bridges, and you try to like download and get an idea of what kind of bugs you're looking for. I'll talk more about this later also. Yeah, okay, this is what I was going to talk about. So, when you are going to audit a protocol, you need to know that not every protocol has the same kind of bugs. I mean, if you're doing like staking, obviously there will be staking related bugs like using a flash loan to try to steal rewards. But if you're auditing something like a bridge, you're not going to have a thing like using flash loan to steal rewards, because there are no rewards to steal. But instead, what other kind of bugs that might appear in bridges but might not appear in other kind of protocols are like gas manipulation. You try to steal gas from the bridge protocol itself. So the main point of this part is of looking through similar protocols on Solodit. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if there's messages. Oh, hi, victories. Yeah, the main part of what you're trying to find in this preparation phase is you just need to get an idea of what kind of bugs you're going to be looking for, and you sort of like gain an inspiration of what other similar protocols in the past, like what areas are weak or like vulnerable to, are very prone to having bugs, and you know where you're supposed to focus on. For an example, this was actually my prep for the Chainlink CCIP audit. I know it looks very intense, but most of the time, for most of these, I just clicked into it and I just scrolled through to get a general idea of what kind of bugs. And what you need to remember is not every bug can be like taken out from one audit and straight up copy pasted into another. But like, yeah, you just need to know which kind of gain some kind of ideas of what can be taken from one audit and moved into another audit. Like non-contextual bugs, I guess is what I was saying. Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain, but I hope this is clear. If it isn't clear, you can try to ask me later, I guess. Yeah.
Amazing talk, buddy. You're doing very, very good, okay? Just so you know.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I didn't rehearse this, so I'm just shooting stuff off the top of my head. You guys can clarify anything later and I'll explain. Yeah, but basically what I did was, these are a lot all like bridge protocols or cross-chain protocols. So they are related to what CCIP is. And I just clicked through all of them and just briefly scanned through to see what kind of bugs they had and what kind of weak areas they have in their implementation. So next phase will be understanding. So previously it was preparation, you didn't have the code, you just have like a name of the protocol you're going to be auditing and maybe you have some notes of what you're going to be auditing. But the next phase is understanding. This is after you get the code and now you are trying to understand the code base itself. So the first thing I like to do is I like to look at documentation. I know this is quite a controversial point also because some people say that you shouldn't look at documentation, you should just look at code because it introduces bias to yourself. But I think that's quite like a hardcore way of auditing because without having a overview or an idea of what you're going to be auditing or what the protocol does, it takes a lot more time to figure it out from just the code itself. So what I do to counter the point where you don't introduce bias, right, to your thought process is you only look at the what in the documentation instead of the how. So example of what is these three questions basically. These are what I look for in the documentation and this is what I actively avoid in the documentation. Example of what I look for is basically architectural kind of explanations. So what kind of components exist in the protocol? So let's say if it's a bridge, you know that there will be something on the L1 side, something on the source chain, and something on the destination chain. And you need to figure out how these two components are working with each other and what they are specifically. And secondly, will be what different actors and roles. So let's say you have like a staking protocol. You need to figure out what are all the different, I don't want to call them message.senders, but you need to figure out what are all the different people in your protocols that can call functions because obviously they're going to be fulfilling different roles.
All the actors, right?
Example, yeah, all the actors. So example will be you have like borrowers, lenders, and you need to know which function will be called by which actor because then it's not going to be all the same. And this is a bit of a plus point is when you're looking through the documentation and you are figuring out what components they have and what actions users can take. You should actively try to identify which areas are the most complex and which are more prone to bugs. Usually what I do when I read documentation is like I see some logic like liquidation logic and I know there's probably going to have an area that have bugs. So I'll just like write down in Notepad like, oh, take a look at this closer later, or what if I liquidate myself twice or something. These are just like pure ideas. You haven't looked at the code yet, but maybe when you have a greater understanding of the code, they might help. They might not also, but there's no harm. Why do we avoid the hows? Is because these are how is an explanation of the code itself, and this is what you shouldn't be getting from the documentation. Your idea of how the code works should be coming from the code base itself. If not, if you have like a preconceived notion of how the code base works before you even look at it, you are going to be seeing things differently than what it actually is. I think a good example of this is math equations, because usually what I like to do for math equations is I will take the math statement and I'll rewrite it and like do algebra in a way that makes sense to me. But if you have audited long enough, you realize that like your view of a math equation and someone else's understanding of a math equation, like the equations are the same, but they might understand it differently from yours. So this is the idea of like having a preconceived notion. And yeah, so this is why you skip any explanation of how the code works. But unfortunately, usually like user documentation is how the code works, because that's like what the documentation is for. An example of what I was saying just now, this is the CCIP architecture that I had while looking at the documentation. So the left one is just a nice diagram, but honestly, I didn't look at this. The right one was what I was looking at for in the documentation and what I was referring to in most of the audit. Because all these small images, I guess, these are actually contracts. Tender and receiver are the actors, and this is a contract, this is a contract, this is a contract. And these are off-chain components of the bridge, and this is also another contract, and another contract. So with this architecture diagram, when you're looking at the code, you will have an idea of where it fits in the overall picture of the protocol. So what I did for this audit actually is when I audited it this way. So I started from the source chain, I audited the sender, I audited the router, then the on-ramp, then the on-ramp sends tokens to the token pool, and you cross over, and you audit the off-ramp, the token pool, and the router and the receiver. So once you have a idea of the architecture of the protocol, it makes auditing a lot easier because you know what the contract you're looking at fits in the overall picture, and it's like sort of a big puzzle. And when you you need to get an idea of what the puzzle must look like at the end before you start looking at the individual pieces and figuring out how they fit into the overall puzzle. Yeah. I mean, okay, there's one point you take away from this is that even if you like can't find all these, you should at least try to find an architectural diagram of the protocol. So it makes your life a lot easier when you're looking at the code, basically. And now, after you have looked at documentation, and you have an idea of what the Codebase is doing, you need to first determine a structured way to review all the contracts. This is especially important for big protocols. Like CCIP was like 3,000 lines of code, which is okay, it's not very big. But if you have no structured way to approach the code, you're going to waste a lot of time, and you're going to have no idea what the code is doing at all. So some examples of ways that I use to approach contracts in the code is following the flow is the first one. That's what I described just now, where you follow sort of a flow that makes sense for the protocol. In this case, it will be you follow how one message from the source chain crosses over and is received by the receiver on the destination chain. And this is one example. Another example is if you are doing, let's say, a staking protocol, you, instead of following messages, you follow like the funds. So you review like the deposit contract first, and then you see what the deposits are done with in another contract, and then finally you review a withdrawal contract. So this is particularly helpful because you are sort of following like the external flow of how users would approach the code base and how they would call functions in that order also. Yeah. The second structured way is top-down. This is where you have a parent contract and you review the child contract first, and then you sort of look at the parent contract. An example of this, we look at this later also, but let's say your child contract is the vault. So you look at the vault first and see what kind of function it has and what it does, and what are the functions it calls. Then after you have an idea of what this vault does, then you look at the ownable contract, which is the parent, and you see what the ownable contract does. So this is top-down. And the reverse will be, like I said, bottom up. You review this will make sense when you have like, I don't know what the pattern is called, but you have one child contract that is inherited by a lot of other parent contracts. Example will be like, you have like a vault, and then the Codebase has like a lot of different kinds of vaults. So they'll all inherit this vault contract. So it will make more sense if you audit the vault contract first. You look at it and understand what it does. And then you go and see what all the individual inherited vaults does. Yeah, but the main point for this is you can honestly not follow all of this. You can find a way that makes sense for you, but the takeaway is that you have to be auditing the protocol in a way that makes sense for it. There's no fixed way to audit all protocols because they're all different. And if you like try to do top down for every single code base you see, right, you're gonna have a tough time for some code bases because it simply doesn't work. Yeah. Example of that will be Chainlink, once again, which I did follow the flow. And the other will be LUKSO. This is another contest I did. So a bit of background on LUKSO is that they are like their code base was basically sort of open Zeppelin. They have a lot of libraries that their users on their own chain can use, and some of these are interlinked. So if you look at ownable two-step, I think everyone's familiar with this. It's basically the same as open Zeppelins. This is inherited by like a lot of other libraries in their own whole code base. So obviously if you try to do like follow the flow in LUKSO, right, it won't work because it's libraries. You can't audit open Zeppelin like you audit a bridge. So what you do is you determine another way that makes sense for you. In this case, what I did was bottom up. I look at ownable two-step first, and then I look at the things that inherit ownable two-step. And yeah, I don't remember, but I think LSP0 and LSP6 were also like one inherits the other. So you look at this, then you look at this, and then finally you look at this, which makes more sense for this library code base as opposed to trying to do a fixed approach for all code bases. Because like as you can see here, one works better for the other. Now was the fun part. Now I was looking at the code and trying to understand what is actually going on.
Yeah.
So very short. I think a lot of people don't actually have this mental model in mind, is that a smart contract is essentially made up of just two components. It is you have your state variables, which are the state, and then you have functions that manipulate the state from like one state to another. And this, like, if you heard things where people say like, oh, the finite state machine or state transitions, this is essentially what it means. It just means that you have a state and you have functions to make the state move from one state to another. This is very like abstract, but I'll try to explain it more later. But while you're auditing, you must always keep the idea of state in mind. This means that when you're looking at all the functions, like let's say deposit, right? Okay, for the vault contract, you have basically two important state variables. This is your typical ERC 4626 vault, by the way, that I coded for just for example. But these are your state variables, and the two important variables, the three important variables of state is total assets, total shares, and balance of. These two are like I call them configuration variables because they are just like variables that the admin sets and then don't touch. But while you're auditing like the whole contract, you must always keep in mind these three state variables. So when you're looking at deposit, right, after you look at the logic of deposit, you must always ask yourself, what is the effect that this function has on these state variables? Does it increase total shares? Does it increase total assets? What happens to balance off? So when you have this picture in mind, it becomes very clear what each function in the code base is supposed to do. And you can sort of like play around these to gain ideas of where you should look at, which I will elaborate more later. And another thing is that when you're looking at a code base, you should always try to first figure out what the state variables do. Because as I explained just now, like the functions are just sort of used to manipulate the state. But if you have no idea what the state variables are doing, right, when you look at the functions, you will have no idea what's going on because you don't know what these variables represent. But that's why when I first look at a contract, I always try to figure out what the state variables mean first. And sometimes, if like it's very complicated, you can try to look at documentation to figure it out also. Yeah, and this is my usual workflow when I review contract. First, I look at the state variable, as I said just now, and try to figure out what everything represents. When you have an idea of what all the state variables represent in the contract, usually it's like 50% of the work done already because the functions are usually very easy to understand. Unless, of course, it's an AMM and like the math is damn hard. But usually that's not the case. So you always try to figure this out first. Then next, I will look at the constructor. This is what I call state initialization. So when you first start, everything is like 0, right? But maybe when the contract is deployed, you want to make it from a 0 state. You want to move it to like a pre-defined state by the admin that it should be in. So let's say like you have a constructor that sets total shares to like 1000. That will be like the predefined state of 0 and 1000 instead of 0, 0. Yeah, it's a bit abstract also, but I hope you guys can understand. This is a really hard thing to explain, by the way. I have no idea how people do it. Yeah, but okay.
You're doing super good.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the third thing after that, after you have an idea of what the state does, is you look at the functions in an order that makes sense to you. I call this like the state lifecycle, I guess, because an example would be the balance of mapping, right? Like, yeah, if you ever figure out, yeah, this is the user and it maps to the number of shares he has, it's very simple. But what I mean by an order that makes sense is that you should always review deposit before you review withdraw, because deposit will increase balance off and withdraw will subtract from balance off. So if you look at withdraw first, right, it won't make any sense to you because in your mind balance off is still empty and there's nothing there. But if you review deposit first, you know that, oh, it increases balance off for the user first. And then after that, oh, it withdraws and then it subtracts balance off, which makes a lot more sense and it's easier to review. So this is what I call like the state lifecycle. It's a order in which variables will be like manipulated when users call them, because they'll call deposit first and they'll call withdraw afterwards. And no one's going to call them in the reverse order because it doesn't work. Yeah. And some things to do while looking at the code is annotate the code with audit tags. I think everyone does this. I don't think anyone doesn't do this. But what you should be annotating with is basically anything you can think of. You don't need to be conservative with the code, and you don't need to be like conservative with your audit tags. Like if you see, I haven't really done any like audit repos for mine for myself, but if you look at my audit repos, like the code base is just littered with like comments everywhere. So some ideas of what you should be writing down is attack ideas. These are things where you look in the code where you'll say like, oh, if let's say I withdraw ties, maybe it looks like something weird will happen. So you just write this down. It's an audit tag. And potential leads is something where you see in the code base where it looks off. Let's say like the math formula looks slightly wrong, but you don't know how to exploit it yet. But then you'll just put an audit tag there also saying, oh, this looks wrong. Let's look at this later again. And to-dos, these are things where, let's say the protocol is very complex and they have external integrations. I usually will write a to-do note there to say that, oh, let's revisit the external integration later on. Like, let's say it's a Chainlink price oracle integration, right? While I'm reviewing the code base itself, I don't want to suddenly jump into Chainlink's code base and start looking at Chainlink's code base, because that's just bad. So I will leave a note there saying, let me revisit Chainlink's code base later. Yeah, I guess I'll do this with the contract I designed. So the point of this is to show you guys how I review code and what's the order that I mentioned just now. Let me drink water first. Wow, so many people.
You got a lot of fans, bro.
Nah. Yeah, but okay. So this is your typical vault contract that I think everyone who has audited has at least seen like once in their life. And yeah, this pattern is basically everywhere. Because what you have is, okay, I'll do this in a order that I usually review contracts. So when I open the contract, you see it's vault.so, it's vault, and it's ownable. Usually what I do is I look at the state variables first. So I mean I already explained this just now, but you see that token is the underlying asset of that the vault will hold. So users will deposit token and they will withdraw token. This is quite obvious. And next you have the two important state variables, total assets and total shares. So if you look at the code, you look at the contract, you can sort of guess that total assets is the total amount deposited into the vault. And then total shares is just like how much shares the user holds. The total amount of shares that all users hold. And yeah, there's not much to be said about this. But if you don't have an idea of what these two state variables are, when you look at the code, it'll be very hard to figure out what the code is doing. But once you know these two and you know what they should be, the first thing is very easy to figure out what the code is doing. And the second thing is when the code updates your state variable wrongly, you will be able to tell instantly because you know what the variable should be and what it shouldn't be. And third will be balance of mapping. So it's basically the user to how many shares they hold. This is quite obvious. And maybe now an idea you have is, oh, since this is total shares and this is balance of, the sum of shares in everyone's balance of mapping for all users should be equal to total shares. So this is where you like write down like an audit tag. Oh, I have an idea invariant that sum of balance of everyone's balance of mapping should equals to total shares. And maybe this helps you find a bug later. Maybe it doesn't, but it's just something worth noting. This should be a U in 256. But yeah, this is treasury. These are what I call configuration variables. The admin will set this and he'll set this and he'll never touch it again. Something usually like place where I find mediums, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, is when the admin changes these variables. Let's say it changes this from like 50% to 100%. Is there anything in the contract that will break? This is like one small part where you can find like medium bounds, I guess, in contests. But usually there isn't. So now that we have an idea of what all the state variables do, we can now look at the constructor. So this constructor is very boring. It doesn't do anything except set token. But what I like to do is I look at the constructor and I look at all the state variables. Okay, usually how I audit is I have two screens actually. I don't look at one screen. So usually I split my screen and I have one screen looking at the state variables and the other screen looking at the code itself. So I will scroll through the code on the left side and just have this fixed on the state variable shown on the right side. So I can like refer over total shares is total shares. Yeah, this is how I audit. But you don't have to copy this, just find what works for you. So this constructor is very boring, doesn't do anything. But what I like to do is I like to figure out what state variables it doesn't set. Because sometimes they will forget to initialize a variable. So here I will put like an audit tag, let's say treasury and withdrawal fee BP not set in constructor. So with this you can really have ideas of what might go wrong. Maybe they forgot to set it in the constructor, or maybe they do something like they set it in a setup function later, but you have attacks where like you can front run this setup function to do something weird in the normal user functions. I've only ever seen this once in a code base where like they forgot to they don't set the fee in the constructor, and then you can front run their set fee function to like bypass fees or something like that. Yeah. But usually I will note this down. After that, like to the point of state life cycle that I mentioned just now, I'll look at the admin setter functions first. Because before you look at all the user functions, right, you need to know how the contract is configured. What is withdrawal fee BP set to? What is treasury set to? And like what token will be set to? And you need to like keep this in mind while you're auditing. So this is a very boring function. It just sets fee and it checks BP denominator, which is 10,000. So I mean, there's nothing much to explain here. You just know that 10,000 is 100%. And like you check like this arrow is correct because sometimes it's not. Yeah. I guess one thing you can, some very lame medium round that people try to submit is that, if this check doesn't exist, they'll put like, admin can wrap. But honestly, I don't think this is a bug at all. Yeah. If anyone tells you this is a bug on Twitter, please don't believe them. I mean, you can log it as centralization risk, I guess. But yeah, don't try to submit this as a medium.
I guess it depends on the developer, right? I mean, if the developer takes it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. But yeah, this will never be higher than a low in the contest. So please don't try. Yeah, the third thing after that is you can look at, now you start looking at the deposit, the user-facing functions. As I said just now, you look at like deposit and withdraw in this order, because if you look at withdraw first, right, it doesn't make sense because total assets will still be 0 in your mind. In your mind, total shares will still be 0, so it doesn't really make sense to review it the other way. So let's look at deposit. I'm not going to explain this like line by line because it's going to take forever. But basically, this does like the standard calculation where if total assets is 0 and you mean like 1-to-1 ratio. So for like 10 assets, you get 10 shares. And if not, it does the standard share calculation and then mint. Okay, I guess I can explain how I look at functions. So basically what I do first is I take a overview look of the entire function first. So I'll look at the logic. This check does this does like this calculation and calls min. But I don't click into min and see what min does. I look at the entire function first to know what it's doing. Then I know after it does the calculation, it transfers assets from message sender to address this. And I guess that you can add an audit tag saying this is an unsafe transfer. Yeah, so this is basically what I mean by like a lead. You see that this is unsafe, but maybe the token address is like only USDC. You don't know, but you just note it down first, so later you can like check with the developer like, what is token going to be? Yeah. And after you look through all the logic once as an overview, then I go through it a second time to see what the individual functions do. So now I look at min and I know that it's updating balance off and it's updating total shares. Very simple. Yeah. Then after this, after I have an idea of what the function does and what like all the internal functions do, now I will look at the state again, and I'll this is something I impose for myself. After every function, I will go through the list of the state variables again and see whether it is used and see whether it is updated. So this is quite time consuming, but sometimes it does help to find bugs, and it helps to like reinforce your understanding of the code also. Like literally I'll do, token, is it used? Yes, because you are transferring tokens from message sender to the vault. Yeah. So let's say like if this was missing, right? Sometimes you'll forget. Like you won't see it for some reason. But when you go through like the state variables, right, you'll see a token, is it used? Then you realize that token is not used here. And you realize that this statement is missing. So this is basically what this part is for. Then I'll go through total assets. Yes, it's incremented. Total shares. Yes, it's incremented also. Balance off is also incremented. And then treasury and withdrawal fee is not used and it's not updated, but that's fine. But sometimes if I'm not sure whether it should be used or not, I will note it here. Like treasury and withdrawal fee BP is not used. And later, once I have a better understanding of the code base, I will revisit this and see that is it supposed to be used or not. If it's supposed to be used, then the audit issue. If it's not supposed to be used, then like put like audit okay to say that it's not used, but it's correct. The code is correct. So after this is like basically what I do for every function. The withdrawal function also, and yeah, wow, okay. Fun interaction portion. Can anyone tell me what the round is here?
Just use the chat or ask to speak and I'll open the mic.
Maybe I can split screen so I can see what you people are typing.
Let me invite some people to speak.
Anyone has an idea of what the bug is here?
Let me invite some people to speak and let's see what they have to say.
If no one wants to speak, it's fine also. I just an interaction portion, I guess. Wait, am I supposed to invite people?
Yeah, I'm inviting everyone, so I guess someone will take it at some point.
Oh, the green hand is you pressing, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess not, but
Tigran will save us. How's it going, Tigran? I mean, I just invited you to speak. Dark Art, nobody's taking the mic. They're shy today.
I think that's fine. Man. I mean, honestly, when I was in like the some of the calls, I also don't speak.
Let me see. Someone got the mic. Tigran, how's it going, brother? Oh no, Dark Art, how's it going?
Oh, good.
Can you try to find? Let's try to find the bug. Can you go to the function? So what is the bug in the withdrawal function? That's the question.
I think it's burning the tokens without checking if the transfer is correct. It's not using safe transfer, but just normal transfer.
Okay, there's
the token without actually sending the assets.
That is correct. I mean, that is one of the bugs, but I already wrote it here. But specifically in these 3 lines, there is something wrong. It's a hot topic now, by the way, this year especially.
Next, anything?
Oh, I see what they're doing. It's access control.
I know it's not.
Proxy saying division bad, and Vectorize is saying rounding.
Yeah, they're correct. That's correct. It's rounding. Yeah, basically, the phrase of the week. I guess, but also I guess, yeah. But
so what's the problem?
This week is that you should always round in favor of the protocol and round against the user. So in this case, you see that the user provides the number of assets that he wants, and then instead of rounding up, okay, the protocol will take the number of assets and calculate the number of shares that the user needs to burn. But instead of rounding up, it rounds down. So basically, this is in favor of the user instead, because let's say if assets is very small, this will round down to 0, and you can essentially withdraw assets for and burn no shares, which is free money. Yeah. So
but it's a practical attack, I guess. I mean, the value of the asset is very low and you're rounding down to 0. You're not getting arbitrage from that, right?
This depends on the ratio of some people call it share price. I call it share to asset ratio, because it's only possible if your total assets is a lot larger than total shares. So that is why you see in a lot of the recent hacks, right? They do it on newly deployed vaults, because once the vault is deployed and it has assets and shares, it's very hard to manipulate total shares to go up and be a lot bigger than total shares. Yeah, basically you need this to be very big and this to be very small. But in a newly deployed protocol, it's easier to manipulate this number.
And how do we fix it?
The fix is that I would recommend is you get the user to specify the number of shares and you calculate the number of assets that they should get. So this will still round down, but you are rounding down in favor of the protocol because let's say if shares is very small, if shares here, and then like you have this line calculates the number of assets, just ignore this part. If this is very small and then it rounds down, the user will get 0 assets for his shares, which is like no one's gonna do this unless they like don't like money, so it's fine. Yeah, so this is an example of rounding in favor of the protocol. Yeah, but okay, back to the point.
Very nice.
Yeah, so this is where I will leave an audit tag. Maybe I don't know. I know that the rounding is off, is in the wrong direction, but maybe I don't know how to exploit it yet. Like you said just now, maybe this is not exploitable, it's not a real bug. But this is what you call an audit lead. You know that it should round up. And you put this here so that later you can come back and with a better understanding of the protocol, you can find a way to manipulate total assets up and total shares down. Yeah. Fun fact is this was like the whole point of the Morpho contest because this was literally their code base. But that's unrelated. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the person has said no, check for number of assets. I realized it also, but then I realized that it will revert here. So that's not a real bug. But that's a good spot though, because while coding this, I did not intentionally put that in, but I realized afterwards. Yeah. And after that, while you're looking through the code, so you come to this math operation. This is very simple. All it does is that you take the withdrawal fee from the number of assets that the user withdraws and you subtract it from his assets. So this withdrawal fee will remain in the vault and the remaining will get transferred to the user. Quite simple. But maybe sometimes if you have like a math operation, like let's say this was like a lot more complex and you don't understand it, you can leave an audit tag saying that this math hard, I don't understand. Revisit it later. Or something like that. So usually sometimes when I don't understand code, right, because we are like not all gods and we don't like all instantly understand code in one shot. Sometimes what I do is I leave a tag saying I'll revisit this later and let it like sit in my mind and or like maybe even like take a nap and then I'll come back to it and review the code again with a fresh perspective. This really helps a lot. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know why. But when you have like you take some time off from the code and you revisit it again, it helps you in like understanding code better. Yeah. So this is basically the understanding phase of the protocol of the auditing, and this is how I review my code also. Yep. And okay, the thing you keep in mind is that when you are reviewing deposit and withdraw, you must always keep in mind like the share to asset ratio, because this is where bugs will occur. Let's say if total asset is very huge and total shares is very small, you can have like rounding issues as we discussed just now. So you must always keep in mind of how it is manipulating your state and how calling a withdraw function will change total assets and how it will change total shares and like vice versa. Yeah. So this is how I review code. Now is the even more fun part. This is ideating. There is really no fixed methodology to do this part of your audit. It's just what comes to your mind you look at, and what doesn't come to your mind you don't look at, I guess. But yeah, the first thing I would usually do is I revisit all my audit tags to see what I need to do. And as discussed just now, like these are the kind of audit tags that you can have. And now when you look at them, you need to ask yourself like questions. So if it's an attack idea, you must ask that, oh, is this attack possible? Is there any impact if I do something like this? An example would be, this audit tag, not this, but this. Just now I mentioned if these are not set in the constructor, maybe an idea would be you front run the admin calling set withdrawal fee to see if anything weird can happen. So you ask yourself, is this possible? Yes, it is possible. But is there any impact? You'll realize that there's no impact because like even if I guess in this vault because it doesn't do anything, even if your withdrawal fee is still 0 and you get all your assets back, like there's no impact to it because you are just you don't profit from it. So this is like how you look at your audit tag. So I'll say audit okay, like this is fine. It doesn't set, but there's nothing I can do about this. That is a bug. Potential lead will be an example of this. You know that the code is wrong, but you don't know whether you can exploit it. So you'll ask yourself, can I get to a state where a state in the contract where total assets and is very big and total shares is very small, such that this becomes exploitable. So this is an example of a potential lead. You know something is wrong, but you don't know whether you can exploit it. And now during your ideating phase, you try to find a way to exploit it by like moving the state. Yeah. And the third one is just to do, I don't have an example of this here, but if like, let's say this bot used the Chainlink Oracle for whatever reason, now is a good time to like, because you have a full understanding of the code base, now is the time where you go and look at how the Chainlink Oracle works and see whether it can affect your code base. Like let's say the Chainlink Oracle reverts because of like blah 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 reason. You can look at it and see that, oh, if it reverts, does it affect my protocol? Will my protocol like get lost or something? So this is like your to-do. Or maybe like this math equation, if it was very hard and you didn't understand it, now's a good time to try to understand it before you start looking at attack ideas and try to get ideas of what to do. Yeah, but this is usually the bulk of my audit phase because usually like after an audit I have like 200 of these tags and it takes like very long to go through all of them. Yeah, but the point of this ideating phase is you need to ask yourself questions about the code base. So with the state in mind, you need to ask like, well, let's say we are at this function. What if total assets is 1 and total shares is 0? Yeah, you just ask yourself a lot of what if questions of like funny, a lot of ideas won't work, but you just need to generate ideas of funny things that maybe might have an impact at the end. Another thing is like, another thing that I like to ask myself is, what if I call functions like in some weird order? So let's say if you call withdraw 2 times, right? There's actually another bug here that I planted. But basically, if you call withdraw twice, since the withdrawal fee remains in the vault, right? On your second withdrawal, if you withdraw once versus you withdraw like 2 times, right, you actually get more assets. I'm not gonna explain it because my voice is dying. But yeah, this is the idea of keeping in mind the state, because since the withdrawal fee remains in the vault, when you withdraw once, let's say your fee is 30%, right? You'll like get like assets times 30%. Assets minus 30%. That's what you get. But if you withdraw twice, on your first withdrawal, right, the withdrawal fee will remain in total assets. So on your second withdrawal, total assets will be slightly bigger than what it should be, and then you'll get more assets back. So this is what I mean by having the state in mind. Because if you have a solid idea of what total assets can be and what total shares can be, right, and in like how you call the functions affect these 2 variables, you can sort of like, I call it manual like fuzzing, I guess. You can play around in your mind to know like what state of the protocol you can reach, and maybe if you call them in a weird order, the state can like break. This is just manual fuzzing. I guess I'll call it. It's like things you can do like while not looking at the code once you have a good idea of what it does. okay, I sort of explained the leads part just now, but there are basically two kinds of leads. The first kind of lead is you see something is broken and then you find a way to exploit it. And the second kind of lead is that you find a nice way to exploit something, which is, sorry, if you see something is broken and you find a way to exploit it, is like these like unsafe transfer from. You know that this is unsafe, but it should be safe, so it's broken. And then finding a way to exploit it will be, you see whether token can be like USDT, so this will break. And the other example is the converse, which means that you know there is a nice way to like exploit something, which is, oh, if this rounds down and total assets and is very big and total shares is very small, you can essentially like get infinite money because you can get assets for no shares. But now you need to find a way to exploit it. So like the manual fuzzing thing just now, you need to sort of think of a way to get total assets, to manipulate it up and manipulate total shares down. So this is the second kind of lead. And usually this is more like interesting and more fun, but it also takes a lot of time because sometimes you get into a rabbit hole where you try to exploit and break the state, but it's just not possible. Yep. And like, okay, the third part of auditing, once you have exhausted all your audit tags and you have marked them all as like okay or issues, right? And you run out of ideas of what you want to look at, you can now look at Solodit. Where's my? Yeah, you can now look at Solodit to gain inspiration of some attack ideas to look at. I want to preface this by saying that this is the only point in your audit where you should be looking at Solodit, because a lot of beginners, what they do is while they are still in the understanding phase and they're like looking at the code, while they are looking at the code, then after that what they do is, without a solid understanding of the entire code base, they start looking through Solodit and they do what I call pattern matching. So they like see like, oh, it's a vault that does deposit as a withdrawal and it's like ERC 4626, and they have no idea what it does, right? They haven't looked at the logic in depth, and they just Google ERC 4626 and they start looking through like these 1 gazillion findings, trying to see if it applies to the vault. This is not what you should be doing in an audit. Like pattern matching is something that can be done with a bot. So you want to be better than a bot, so don't do this. But instead, what you should be doing is, after you have like played around with the code a lot in your head in this auditing phase, and you have gained a lot of understanding of the code in your understanding phase, now you look at Solodit and you try to gain inspiration for like what kind of attacks might work. So when you Google like, vault rounding, because you know there's a rounding problem, and then you just look through all of these and see like, maybe one of these might explain a way to exploit the rounding, and you can see whether it applies to your code base or not, and whether it will work or not. Yeah, but as you sort of become more experienced in auditing, this is sort of a phase where you try not to have anymore. When I first started, I also did this quite a lot in the auditing phase because I didn't have like a lot of ideas of how you can exploit the code. But as you audit more, you should slowly try to like be creative in the ways you think about code, such that you don't need to rely on looking through Solodit to find ideas, and instead you can think of ideas of your own with the knowledge that you have of the code base. Yeah, but the takeaway is, don't look at Solodit before you understand the code, because that's just pattern matching. Some general tips I will share is, firstly is to get comfortable with testing. This is not like testing as in like people like you see Patrick saying like, oh, write your unit tests. Like, please don't. Okay, some people do it in an audit, but personally I don't. What I mean by testing is that you should be comfortable with playing around in the code in your own environment, quote unquote. So usually for all my audits, I have like this, I call this is a Foundry repo. I call it Playground. So I just like, if you can see, I have a lot of random stuff from a lot of audits just like listed here. When I don't understand something, I'll just copy paste the logic into this file and I'll just run it to see what it does. An example would be for one of my audits, I had no idea whether self-destruct would, if you self-destruct to your own address, do you end up with either or not? Yeah, so I didn't understand that, and then I play around with it. Fun fact, do y'all know?
I think that's forced ether send, right?
Yeah, if you self-destruct, if you self-destruct to your own address, do you end up with ether or not?
But what about this Solidity 0.20, 820 that we don't have self-destruct anymore?
Is it still there? It's just that the way it works changed.
I see.
I don't remember, but yeah. Yeah, actually, by the way, you're correct. I forgot to update total assets. I just realized also. That's not the point, though. Clearly, I don't write code. Yeah, but this is quite a funny point, I guess. So what happens is if you self-destruct to yourself, right? Okay, I might be wrong, don't quote me, but from my very funny testing is you don't get the if back. This is a way to just delete the if supply. Because I was looking through something in Geth and I realized that yeah, if you self-destruct to your own address, you don't get header back. Or for whatever reason, I don't know. But yeah, that's a fun point. But yeah, the main point is that for all these kind of weird things, maybe I don't understand how something in Solidity works, or maybe I don't understand how something in the math works. I will just try it out here. So like I'll do like OD equals D dot U destructor, and then I'll just try it out here. This might leak my API key, so I'm not gonna run it. But yeah, I'll just try it out and see the result, and then oh, it doesn't work, or oh, it works. Yeah, so this is what I mean by get comfortable with testing. You shouldn't be just relying on looking at code itself. Instead, what you should do is when you have the chance to and you don't understand something, you should be comfortable with trying it yourself and like just playing around in your own testing environment to see what goes on. Some people do this in Foundry, some people do this in Remix. I personally use Foundry, but it's all fine. Yeah, another thing is that fuzzing is quite good. I don't mean this by you set up the whole fuzzing suite for the whole code base. Although you can do that for audits if that's what you like to do. But some things are things like math equations, and if they're like very, very complex, sometimes I cannot tell if, relying on like my brain alone, I cannot tell if I can get this number to like lower than something, or I can break this number. So this is where fuzzing comes in. You just a very hacky way is you just copy paste the equations and the logic into your own test, and then you just like run a fuzzing test on this to see if the logic can break. So what you essentially do is you extract the logic from the code base and you put it into your own testing suite instead of having to like write a fast test suite for like the entire code base, which takes super long. Yeah. Third part is, like I said just now, is often good to let your ideas rest. This is why I don't encourage rushing audits also, because sometimes when I have an idea or I look at the code for a while and then I go to like take a nap or I spend a day off and then I come back, I'll usually have a new idea of what goes on and a new idea of like maybe I have a new attack to try out, or maybe I look at the code differently. So it's good to like not rush your audits and let it sort of let your brain sort of digest the code for a while. Yeah, these are my tips. Reporting, honestly, I don't feel like going through this, but maybe you can come take a vote in chat whether you guys want me to go through a reporting part.
I'm pretty sure everybody wants it.
I mean, this is just basically like how to write a good report, which is not very interesting, honestly.
No problem, bro. Feel free to do it your way.
Yeah, I'll go through this quickly on what I think a good report should consist of, what you should do and what you shouldn't do, for like our code arena judge sake, because like with the number of submissions increasing in contests, like we are going insane. Yes, but that's not the point. So the typical report, okay, why you should write a good report is because you get this tag that gives you a lot of money. Like if you're not familiar with how code arena formula works, right, is that when you have selected for report, right, you get 30% more than what you should have gotten. And the good thing is that this also, I was going to say this also applies to unique findings, but I guess if you write a shit report and it's a unique finding, it doesn't really matter because you'll still be selected for a report. Yeah, but the whole point is that let's say you have like a finding with one dupe, right? This selected for report tag, you get 30% more, right? It can be like a few $1,000s. Yeah, so this is why you should write your reports nicely. So every report typically consists of 4 sections. Like in Sherlock is also like, it's these 4 sections but it's in a different order. What you have is the impact section. And okay, I'll go through in order. Typically, I use this format for all my reports. It's bug description. So this section should describe what the bug is and how it can be exploited. Basically, if by looking at this section alone, right, the person reading should be able to tell what the bug is and how it causes an impact. The second section will be impact. This is honestly just a reiteration of your last line in the bug description, but this should be like a short summary of what can happen and how it can happen, which is severity and likelihood. So for example, in this one, you see that the condition, the likelihood is if someone calls transfer ownership with the wrong address, this is the likelihood, or the condition, I guess. And the impact is that, the impact is that you can bypass the protection that is inbuilt for the report, for the protocol, and you can destroy like their account in one transaction. Because context is this is a ownable 2-step library. I mean this LSP0 contract inherits an ownable 2-step library. So you should not be able to destroy the LSP0 contract in like one transaction, in one call. Yeah, so this is clearly an impact. But the important part is to keep this impact section short. You should state like the likelihood, and then you should state the impact. And don't write an essay on what can happen. Just leave a nice one line. The third section will be proof of concept, which is a coded test of you demonstrating how the bug. Point 1 is demonstrating the bug, and point 2 is demonstrating that the bug causes the impact. This should be like outlined in your proof of concept. And yeah, this is just coded. But let's say if you don't have the time to write a coded proof of concept, what I like to do in this section is I give a step-by-step example of what can cause the bug to happen. So this step-by-step example would move into this section. Yeah, the other important part I would like to mention is that a lot of people tend to confuse proof of concept with bug description. Like, I see people do like, they have a description of the bug, and then proof of concept, they have another explanation of the bug, which I don't understand. You should just be explaining everything in bug description, and after that, proof of concept should be like concrete proof of your bug can occur, it shouldn't be like a line by line step explanation of the code. It should just be if this happens and then that happens and that happens, something will break. And like the judge will only look at this section if they are not like they don't trust that your description is correct or they doubt something is wrong. So when that happens, right, your proof of concept should be able to show them that your bug is actually true. And then mitigation section is very simple. You just write what you think should be, how the code should be changed to fix the bug. But something I would like to state is you should try to write it as specific as possible. Don't leave some one-line generic explanation like, oh, fix this. But try to be as specific as possible. And if possible, try to provide code of how they can fix it. This is like plus points for getting selected for report. If you like dig through my post-judging QA history, a lot of times I will ask to be selected for report because my recommended mitigation is better, and this is a legitimate reason for it. Yeah. Let me go to the toilet first, and I'll come back.
Awesome.
I've been drinking
No problem.
water because my throat is dying.
No problem.
Or reporting is, I think these are things where it's so minimum effort, but it can really bring your report from like a 0 to a 1. Is that, okay, you should proofread your reports and use Grammarly if you think you need it. Because a lot of reports have like sentences that aren't even like correct grammar, or they like misspell their words, and it looks really, really unprofessional. Like, I think a lot of us that do contests, they eventually want to move on to like audit, solo audits, or getting hired by like Spearbit or other firms. And when you're building a portfolio with your contest reports, right, you want to make sure that your reports look professional and they look like something you can deliver in a audit report. If you're writing like statements that aren't even like spelled correctly, or like words are misspelled, right, these look very unprofessional on you. Yeah. And unfortunately, if you like English is not your first language, you can, I guess, try to use Grammarly to touch it up. Although this is like quite overkill. I've never seen someone use Grammarly in an audit, but yeah. Second point is your report should be short and simple. Example I had was that some people tend to include code blocks that are huge. But what I try to do in my reports is the first code block that I include should be as small as possible, and it should highlight the bug itself. So this way your report is very short and it's also very simple to understand. Don't try to like write some essay on how the bug can occur because it's very hard to read. Yeah. And the last point is don't use ChatGPT. I think everyone knows this, but the unfortunate part about ChatGPT is like, even if you use it to rephrase your reports, right, it's a conversational AI, so it will end up becoming very lengthy, and your report will look like an essay instead of a bug report. So please try to avoid ChatGPT if you can. Yeah, and that's it from me, I guess. I guess we will do questions now. Yeah, if you all have any questions for me, you can about anything. I will answer most of them. So feel free to ask. Any tips for navigating a huge code base with VS Code? People use this extension. I think it's this. Yeah, people use this to navigate around the code base. But honestly, I only use this for the color theme. I'm a bit like manual person. So how I move around in the code base is I type n space withdraw. This is how I jump around with functions instead of control clicking. Because sometimes it doesn't work. So I just defaulted to using this. Yeah, but I guess I don't know what you're asking for because I'm not sure how you can navigate a huge code base with VS Code. It's more of like keeping track of what the files are doing and what files you have to review. Okay, something that some people do is they mark their files after they have finished auditing it. I think Tincho does this, if I'm not wrong. He has like a table or like a Obsidian, not Obsidian, I forgot what it's called, but he has a Notion page with all the files that he needs to audit, and after he audits them, he like marks them with this has been reviewed. So I guess this is one way to like organize your workflow. Yeah, but other than that, I guess it's like just the extension and trying to get something that actually works when you control click. Apparently this is a new thing. Apparently this works also, but I could never get this to work. So you can try to configure this and see if it works for you. Yeah. Do we read a lot of reports? No. I don't believe in reading reports just for the sake of it. Because if you haven't audited the code base before, right, the returns that you get is not very helpful. And the example of this, right, is like, let's say you are doing sorry, I'm still a student, so let's say if you're doing like practice paper for an exam, right, versus just reading a lot of answer sheets, right? Reading a lot of answer sheets is not going to help you do better in an exam. It will help you do better by a bit, but not a lot, as opposed to like doing a lot of practice papers. Yeah, so I don't believe in reading reports just to gain knowledge. If anything, you should be trying to apply your knowledge actively, and then when you realize that you have a knowledge gap, then you try to read stuff. Like, for example, that I mentioned is, let's say you're auditing AMM protocol, and then you realize that you have no idea what a tick is, then you go and read like material on what a tick is. You don't do it the other way where you read like you need solve V3 math and then you just forget. Yeah, I hope this answers your question. How's your process different for bug bounties? I actually haven't done bug bounties in super long, but usually I think the difference is that in bug bounties you don't have to be as thorough, because in an audit you are trying to find like 100% of the bugs, but in a bug bounty you are just trying to find one bug, and you're just trying to find one big bug, so you can skip parts of the code base. You don't have to review it as meticulously as possible. So the example is the thing I mentioned where I look at the function and then I look at all the state variables afterwards to figure out what they are doing, and like that's sort of as a checklist of whether they should be updated or not. I don't do this in bug bounties because it takes too much time, and I think everyone knows that bug bounties time is very important. If not, you're just gonna get duplicated. Yeah. So another thing is that for bug bounties, I scan through a lot, but in audits I purposely slow down when I'm looking at the code, because in audits you want to make sure you don't like miss anything. So even if I look at the function and I can understand it like instantly, right, I will purposely like take time to go through each line slowly. But in bug bounties, you will just fly through the code because you are trying to look at code fast. Yeah. Code in Corina usually in OZ style. Wait, victories, what do you mean by this? I guess it is. Like if you're referring to the thing where internal functions are prefixed with a underscore, I guess they are. But isn't this like standard Solidity practice?
I guess it's standard programming practice actually.
Yeah, I remember reading in the docs that like all internal functions and private functions should be underscore, prefixed with underscore. Oh, you mean like arguments are prefixed with an underscore, is it? Is that what you mean?
I think yes.
Yeah, this is something I see a lot. I don't think it's like common practice, but what people do is that they prefix their local variables so that you can differentiate it from state variables. It sort of helps. It helps auditing though, because it's very obvious what is a local variable and what's a state variable. Yeah, but I think it's just style. Like back in I think it was 2021 or 2022, right? There was a protocol, fun story. There was a protocol that like all the variables were one letter. I'm not kidding. Like everything was named like T, S, V, and then like no one audited it at all. So it's just auditing style, I guess. Yeah. Next bench. I'm damn lazy. I don't go gym. No? I should, but yeah, I don't gym. Sorry. How to arrange time and several contests at the same time? I have to time to shield myself. Yeah, if you read my blog, right? I mentioned that I don't recommend focusing on multiple contests at once, and you should always spend as much time on a contest as possible. The reason for this is that in a contest, right, your rewards are exponential. For every more complicated or more unique bug you find, right, it will be less duplicated, so your reward will grow exponentially. So you should always be spending as much time as possible to find like the deep hidden bugs. This is a very sad part of audit contests that I sort of don't like also, is that you can be spending a lot of time to find some obscure medium bug that the protocol will just acknowledge. But unfortunately, that pays very well in contests because not a lot of people are going to be digging for this medium bug. Yeah, but basically I recommend doing contests one at a time, and you spend as much time as possible, unless you're like 100% confident that you found every bug. But I don't think anyone will ever be, so yeah. What do you use to build your report PDFs? I use a Google Drive. I type in Google Docs manually because it looks nice. But I guess a lot of people use the Spearbits report generator, which I tried, and it looks not bad also. You can try to adapt that to yourself. But yeah, if you look at my audit portfolio, like this is manually typed in Google Drive. But you don't have to, because honestly I'm very particular about formatting. Like when my code block splits into 2 pages, I get very annoyed. That's why I type in Google Drive. Yeah. Okay, must skip gym to get to my Milotruck level. Please go gym. It's healthy for you. Yeah, don't be like me. You mentioned in your slide, determine a structured way to review all your contracts. I do what I think fits the protocol best. I mentioned like CCIP is a bridge, so I follow the flow. And if it's like LUKSO, I do top down or bottom up, because that's what I think fits the audit best. Like if you for me, I don't really have a fixed methodology for anything. I really do what I think is best for the audit and what I think will help me the most in the audit. I guess follow the flow makes the most sense if you're asking what I prefer the most. Yeah, because usually that is what makes the most sense when you're auditing. And it's very easy to like follow what the user thinks when he's calling functions. When you, let's say you follow like them depositing and withdrawing funds. Yeah, but this is really like up to you when you're auditing. I guess that's all. No more questions.
Brother, amazing talk. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, this was really, really insightful. I mean, people will learn a lot from this talk. So thank you, bro. You have any closing thoughts? Any message you want to leave?
Not really. I guess look forward to Renaissance, I guess. We'll be doing a lot of contests and we'll be auditing. But yeah, that's all. I don't shield myself in solo audits anymore because I did them for a few months and then I realized that they are very boring. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah.